Let's go.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Fran. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. And today, session number 5 of pAIperTrail.
Mhm.
Our session today is risk treatments turning assessment into action. And in our last session, we discussed how every organization naturally identifies risk as both threats and opportunities that needed attention. But understanding them is only the starting point. Real progress begins when we decide how to respond to those threats and opportunities. So in this session, I think we look at the treatment options available for both threats and opportunities and how to select the right actions and how pAIperTrail, our software, supports those choices with structure and clarity. Right. That's a kind of a interesting introduction because it's a lot to digest here. So I think that as usual, we go from top down. So the first thing is how we define the terrain or the field that we're going to talk today. So what do we
Mhm.
mean by risk treatment?
Okay, that one's pretty easy. Basically, risk treatment is the action you choose in response to a specific threat or opportunity.
Right.
That's basically it. It turns assessment into responsive behavior.
Yeah.
So you basically decide what outcome you want, then assign clear steps to achieve it. That's
Right.
risk treatment.
Right. So um and when you talk about risk treatment, so one single risk might have more than one treatment, or is risk treatment like a one by one?
No, you can have multiple treatments. Most meaningful risks need more than one action in response,
Right.
right? So you might reduce likelihood with a control, transfer financial exposure through insurance, contract supplier duties, monitor key signals,
Hmm.
and accept the remaining as residual risk,
Hmm.
right? So that's multiple different treatments, and we'll get into the various types in a second. But each treatment targets a different part of the exposure of the
Yeah.
risk.
And so then what treatment options apply for threats? This is the other
Well, a
big.
lot of people are familiar with risk and mitigation,
Right.
right? And that's as far as the common language goes, and they consider they're thinking of threats, okay?
Right.
But there's actually what we name as 6 different treatment types,
Right.
okay? In like ISO compliant risk management, 2 of them are combined into one and that kind of stuff. But I like to call them out individually,
Yeah.
in this way. So, number one kind of treatment would be to avoid, right?
Right.
So avoidance is when you stop doing whatever activity creates the threat
Right.
to your business, right? So an example would be discontinuing a fragile manual process that could potentially or often does fail, right? Another treatment type would be to reduce, what a lot of people typically mean when they're talking about mitigate, right?
Right.
So to reduce is to lower the impact or likelihood with certain actions or controls, right? So from a computer security perspective, adding authentication controls to reduce unauthorized access to your environment. That
Yeah.
would be a reduction.
Right.
Then there's transference, where you're actually moving a potential financial loss to another party.
All
So,
right.
for example, purchasing insurance against the equipment failure, right?
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't change anything other than it takes the threat from you and puts it over to an insurance company for a
Right.
fee. Now, there's another one that a lot of people it's very, very common, but a lot of people put it into transfer. But I think transference is very clearly things like insurance.
Right.
Contract is one of the treatment types. So assigning duties and performance requirements through agreements,
Right.
right? Like a privacy policy or terms of use or something along those lines, or requiring a supplier to meet strict uptime or quality obligations or something
Yeah.
along those lines, right? So through contract, you end up treating a threat,
Right.
right? Another treatment type that is kind of standalone is to monitor or inspect,
Right.
right? That's basically improves your ability to detect when something is going wrong or provide you early warning when something may go wrong,
Right.
but doesn't necessarily impact, its likelihood
Right.
or its gross impact on your business. It's
Right.
just basically checking to see if something bad is happening, right? So a good example would be daily inspections or automated alerts
Right.
against some condition. And that's very, very common that people, invest time and effort and labor into monitoring and inspection activities. And sometimes that's the only treatment that you can apply to a threat.
Hmm.
And then there's accept, right? And that's basically retaining a certain amount of exposure and just kind of basically tracking it
Right.
to make sure that it doesn't increase, right? So accepting a low impact risk that sits within your risk appetite, which could be different for various businesses, but basically it's choosing to do nothing about it. You're
Right.
accepting that that risk could occur.
Right.
And that's the six options for treatment in pAIperTrail.
Excellent. And now we spoke about risks, and also we spoke about opportunity. So what treatment options apply to opportunities in pAIperTrail?
Yeah. Now, under a risk, there's threats and opportunities.
Right.
So those are the six treatment types for threats.
Right.
For opportunities, it's there's also six different types.
Right.
And the logic mirrors threats, but each of the options focuses on generating or creating value,
Right.
right?
Right.
And some of them are the exact same. But if we start at the top, we would have exploit, right?
Right.
So that's taking direct steps to secure a benefit. So, for instance, launching a product early in order to capture a growing market,
Right.
right? Would be a way of exploiting an opportunity.
Right.
Enhancing an opportunity, that's a second treatment, enhance, would increase the likelihood or scale of the gain,
Right.
right? So for instance, adding budget to accelerate product development,
Right.
in the same conditions, right? Then you've got share, which is an interesting one. So you
Mhm.
could decide in order to improve an opportunity, that you may partner with others to expand or accelerate value generation,
Right.
right? Maybe co-develop a new solution with a vendor or something along those lines.
Right.
And then you've got three that are named the exact same as along with threats. You've got contract, where you could formalize access, delivery, or shared rewards,
Right.
right? Monitor would be tracking signals until timing or resources align,
Yeah.
right? And then you've got acceptance,
Yeah.
which is basically observing the opportunity without taking any immediate action and
Right.
just keeping track of its factors, but not really taking any clear action.
Right. And so we said environment, so risk, we have under risk we had threats and opportunities.
Mhm.
So and then now we had environment, which are the elements of this environment. So how do you decide which risk to prioritize if we go right back to the risk section? So which are the priorities now to make it more efficient?
Okay. Well, we have an element that is unique to the way I like to deal with risks, but
Yeah.
part of it is standard. And that would be using a consistent scoring method.
All right.
And the base measure is called risk priority number, the RPN.
Yeah.
Okay. And it uses three factors: impact, which is the level of effect the event would have on your objectives if it
Uh-huh.
occurred,
Yeah.
positive or negative; times likelihood, which is the chance that an event will occur under current conditions,
Right.
be it positive or negative. And I'd like to borrow from FMEA, failure modes effects analysis, which is more of an engineering discipline,
Yeah.
but I think it applies across regular risk management, and that's called detection difficulty, right?
Mm.
And that's basically how hard is it to recognize the event early enough to respond effectively to it.
Right. Right.
Some things can be very, very difficult to detect, right?
Yeah.
And some things are very obvious. Now, if you multiply those three, you have an RPN, and
Right.
that ranks the technical priority
Right.
of the risk.
Yeah.
However, then you need to factor in time, right? So some risks demand action sooner because they may occur earlier, right?
Right.
One threat may be hitting you, over a 1 year period, and another one's hitting you over a 1 month period. So you want to factor that in,
Right.
just in case you've got longer or shorter lead times for treatment, right?
Right.
And so I use what's called a time sensitivity multiplier to adjust the priority, right?
Right.
And that stands for time adjusted risk priority number, the TARPN,
Yeah.
right? And basically, when you have TARPN calculated and you have a threshold for your company, which is basically the appetite for your company in terms of risk, either
Yeah.
threat or, outside of which you want to take some kind of an action, right?
All right.
So out of appetite risks move to the top of the actions list,
Yeah.
depending on how high their calculation is,
Yeah.
the TARPN.
Right. And I think that actually at this point the people will always ask this question, particularly as CFOs or the accounting team, or the finance team, how much is going to cost it, and or how do costs and benefits influence the treatment choices? So actually, how at the end it's also part of the risk and opportunities.
Yeah, well, this is all part of natural human decision making anyway, right? You
Right. Right.
basically comparing the treatment cost with the expected change in the exposure or value
Right.
as a result, right? So you pick the option that delivers the best net result. If a treatment costs more than the exposure, you may move it to acceptance or to monitoring,
Right.
right?
Right.
That kind of thing. But it really comes down to, like if something is a compliance factor, you really have no choice,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And the cost is what it is. That's the
Yeah.
cost of being compliant with a mandate from a government, that kind of thing, right? But for things that where you could choose to do nothing, you want to basically weigh the cost against the benefit, and it's
Right.
basically that simple. And that's the way people behave anyway. So
Yeah.
it works out well.
And so so then in these treatments, what does a good treatment documentation looks like in pAIperTrail? So
Okay, well, in pAIperTrail, firstly, you want to be able to select like a treatment type from the
right.
list, depending on whether it is a threat or an opportunity, right? And you want a rationale for that.
Yeah.
You want to be able to enter the expected effort or the cost, right? Um, each treatment, should have an owner, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's responsible for executing that particular treatment.
Right.
And there should be dates against it, due date or that
Right.
kind of thing. And there should be evidence
Right.
of it having been applied, which could be through connected metrics,
Right.
right? And you should also be recording the expected residual risk after treatments are applied. So you
Right.
basically want to know, what's the TARPN before and after treatment.
Right.
And basically each treatment itself is standalone and measurable,
Yeah.
right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. That's the theory, right?
Right.
And auditors expect that level of clarity from you when you describe to them what actions you're taking, and all the reasons why, right?
Yeah.
So all of that kind of documentation, that history is really, really important for
Right.
understanding why you made a decision and for being able to track the progress of your actions
Right.
against your company's goals.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that you mentioned this. What if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. So
Mhm.
how do you measure if the treatment are working then?
Yeah, that's in the metrics,
All right.
right? You track a metric, tied to the risk,
Yeah.
right? So for instance, you review incidents, audit findings, and
Right.
changes to RPN or tarpon, right?
Right.
You also check whether residual risk now sits inside the organization's risk appetite, and if that changes over time. Because a particular threat or opportunity is not supposed to be just static,
Hmm.
right? It's supposed to be assessed and reassessed as time goes on.
Right.
And metrics are an important way of measuring whether or not the actions that you're taking have been effective in reducing the RPN or
Right.
the tarpon, right?
Yeah.
Without metrics, how do you measure it? Is it all just going to be yes, no, or say we're going to do something but not assign it as a
Right.
task and
Right.
not track it? That doesn't make any sense at that point, right?
Yeah.
So you basically want to have that, you want it to be a live system, just like a financial statement,
Right.
where it's measuring net transactions to into profit, right? You should have that kind of a scorecard when it comes to risk management.
Yeah.
And you should be adjusting the plan when performance is weak or conditions change.
Yeah. Right. And
Mhm.
well, I guess actually a walkthrough to a short practical example will make sense of, well, not example, it will provide almost the how people can picture out how it looks like.
Okay. I'll give you a short practical example, just as
Right.
simple as I can make it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so say your company provides a digital platform, a
Right.
service of some sort, or maybe like a shopping website or something
Yeah.
along that line, right? And you assess that the service outage risk has an impact score of 5,
Right.
let's say, okay, out of 5, and a likelihood to occur of, let's say, 4,
Yeah.
and a detection difficulty of, let's say, 3, right? And that would just basically be 5 times 4 times 3. So your RPN is 60.
Right.
Okay. Now let's assume that that is outside of your risk appetite.
Yeah.
Okay. Well beyond that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then let's add time sensitivity and make that high, which would give it a multiplier of, let's say, 2,
Yeah.
because it's typically 1, 1.5, and 2, right? And now your tarpon is 120. That would
Right.
be a very high priority risk in your risk register. That
Right.
would basically make it to the top. It can have a huge impact. It's very likely. It's difficult to detect when something is going wrong, and it's going to have an immediate effect,
Yeah.
due to planned growth or product launches or something
Right.
like that. So let's say you then apply 4 different treatments.
Right.
Okay. So first you reduce by adding an automated failover to a backup server. Okay.
Right.
Then you add a contract to include uptime clauses, in a hosting agreement of some sort. Right.
Right.
And then you do some transference to ensure the residual loss,
Right.
through an insurance company.
Right.
And then you start monitoring it. So you add alerting and regular log reviews,
Right.
right? After implementing those 4 treatments, let's say you've dropped your likelihood to 2, detection improves to 2, impact isn't going to change by this, right?
Yeah.
But basically, because of the likelihood drop and the detection drop, your RPN falls to 20,
Hmm.
right? The immediacy of the issue, the time sensitivity stays the same. So that's still a multiplier of 2. And now the tarpon is at 40. Okay. And let's assume that that is within your risk appetite, where
Right.
120 was way outside of it.
Yeah.
40 is acceptable. That's your residual risk, your residual tarpon, and you set that as basically a boundary. Anything
Right.
outside of that, you have to do something. Anything below that is good for just kind of paying attention to it, right?
Yeah.
And there's a good example. Multiple treatments, impacting the threat in different ways, right? Through reduction, contract, transfer, and monitoring, all different actions that might be performed by completely different people,
Yeah.
right? That can have a massive impact on something as simple as a service outage.
Right. Right. And whoa. So it means a lot of thinking. What
Yeah.
first to establish what is going on, assign a number to that to measure it, which is a treatment that is going to be applied, and then establish which is the risk appetite. So I can imagine that actually any company will have many instances to apply the same formulation. So how does pAIperTrail support and automate these treatment processes?
Well, first off, pAIperTrail, based on your business profile, which is
Right.
fairly detailed, it can help you actually identify the threats and opportunities.
Right.
It'll help you, right? But ultimately, it is up to a user to decide whether they have some additional ones they want to add,
Right.
or certain ones that doesn't really apply to us, that kind of stuff. But at least it helps you, right?
Right.
You're not starting from zero. But pAIperTrail automatically calculates the RPMs and the
Oh, wow.
tarpon and the residual risk automatically. It highlights priorities, it applies risk appetite rules, and it suggests suitable treatments.
All right.
And it also suggests metrics for measuring progress, right?
Right.
So all that kind of stuff can be delivered by the AI assistant, right?
Right.
And it supports multiple treatments per risk and turns each treatment into tasks
Yeah.
with owners and with evidence attached
Right.
to it, right? And it expects certain feedback from the user
Yeah.
on a periodic basis to make sure that it's trackable, right?
Right.
And it will track that progress over time. It'll suggest adjustments when treatments lose effectiveness or conditions change,
Right.
right? And that complete history, that progression,
Right.
becomes part of your digital pAIperTrail, right?
Right.
Ready
Right.
for audit, certification, leadership meetings, stakeholder reports, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Wow. Excellent. So very complex and can be automated. That what really surprised me today is how broad the idea of the treatment actually is. It's always pictured. I always picture treatment as a narrow compliance actions, if you may, but they cover far more for of everyday business than I expected. So they
Just about all of everyday business. Yeah.
right. Right. And it also includes the control, the contract, insurance, the monitoring, the partnerships, and probably I'm missing many of these other things that you covered, and even decisions to stop or delay an activity. So that is absolutely fantastic because then
Mhm.
then you really start treat the risks and also the opportunities. So every part of how a company protects value and creates value. So it's I'm very surprised actually. Not many companies are using this yet. Particularly, I think the challenge is in mid-market, mid-sized companies up to 250, 500 employees. Probably they do have a portion of these, but not. They don't go deeper to measure that every single instance, as you mentioned. But
Well, like we said in our last session,
yeah,
people are doing it anyway. It's the
right,
natural way that people behave. They just, when they hear risk management, it can scare people into thinking, well, now I have to deal with every possibility and stuff that I didn't have to deal with before. And that's not actually
yeah,
true. It's very, very rare that going through the process that a company would discover new things they weren't
right,
already aware of and new actions that they, weren't already performing. But you can't really report on day-to-day operations without
right.
putting them in some kind of a framework.
Yeah, no, I like it because it shows that it turns each treatment into something that can be monitored, evidenced, and potentially improved. As you mentioned,
Mhm.
it's not that they go blind in business; they know what they're doing and they have a good handle of that. But having it in with this structure that we discussed, which is environment, which are the risks, the opportunities, and the treatments. It's interesting to realize that most organizations are already carrying out this treatment, but without calling them treatments. So
Right.
pAIperTrail platform simply captures that activity, give it a structure, and make it easier to manage with confidence. And from there, obviously, it's as we always say, there are requirements, there are controls, and there are evidence, and pAIperTrail is providing all that.
That's correct. Yep.
Right. I think that we can wrap up today, because I think we're going to get into rabbit hole very, very soon, because I have many other questions that probably we can leave for the next session. And thank you very much, Richard. I think actually we went in a lot of details. It's very good to know what is happening in the, let's say, in the kitchen, if you may, without knowing what is a code, but actually what is a treatment to have all these activities automated as much as possible, also with the help of AI for the companies. Wonderful. Thank you very much, and we'll catch up next week.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.